welcome into this month's conversation about the Motherload. I am joined here with Cecilia today, and we are going to have a spontaneous conversation about the mother load. As always, we will start with the question, around the heaviness of the motherhood journey and what that might mean for Celia in particular, and anything that she has used to kind of overcome some of the more challenging parts of that journey for herself. So, welcome, Cecilia. Do you want to give everyone a bit of an introduction of yourself?
Sure. Excuse me. Thank you so much for having me, Kayla. So yeah, like Kayla said, I'm Cecilia. I am a mom to two little girls. They are 4 and 8, Elizabeth and Evelyn, but in reverse order there. Evelyn's the 4-year-old and Elizabeth is the 8-year-old. Anyways, yeah, and I also I have a background in education and I work with kids, so I've kind of spent a good chunk of my life surrounded by youth and families. I'm a postpartum and family care doula, particularly in non pandemic times. That's a slightly easier role to hold. Um, but yeah, I spend a lot of time with kids and families and youth and thinking about all those things and yeah, the professional and personal sides of it all.
Yeah. What do you find, having been a mother for going on 8 years, what have been
Almost 9.
the hardest or the heaviest pieces of that? Like going back to even when your babies were little, like,
I think um, I think this is still true, and I think it changes through the years and days, but I think it's been true since day one and even in pregnancy and continues to be true. I think it's the how do I put this? The loneliness or the feeling like the one, the person. So I don't mean to exclude or discount other experiences of parenthood, people that fall outside the gender binary, people that don't experience pregnancy but still call themselves mothers or still are mothers, not just call themselves. But for me personally, having experienced carrying both my children in my womb and then delivering them, breastfeeding them for years, and then continuing to, for better or worse, sort of be the primary caregiver. And that's not to, again, not to disparage their dad or suggest that he doesn't play a really, really important and essential role. But in my experience and in what I hear from a lot of other parents and mothers is that it does often feel like I'm the one. I'm the person. I'm the one that they run to when they're sad. I'm the person they want to tell their successes to. I'm the person that books the dentist appointments and the person that holds their hand and grits their teeth through those dentist appointments. And I think the hardest thing and the heaviest thing is that feeling of there's no backup, there's no there's nobody that could really take my place. Um, Again, I'm aware that I'm speaking in a really narrow sort of way, but I think that's the point is my personal experience, not necessarily speaking for all parents or all mothers. But for me, the heaviest thing is feeling alone and feeling the weight, like literally the heavy weight of these two tiny humans and all the physical and emotional and mental support that they need and feeling the brunt of that weight on my shoulders.
mhm, mhm. I think, like as you said, without feeling exclusionary, I think that motherhood, becoming a mother, however you become a mother, a adoption or surrogacy or any of those things, like I feel like the primary parent, whoever that is, however they identify, um, would agree with you on
And I
that.
think And I think a lot of that is socially constructed, right? Like I think a lot of this is, not the individual failings of like my kid's dad or anything, but it's the patriarchy, right? It's that he grew up in a family where his mom was the primary person. I grew up in a family where my mom was the sort of primary person, and we see that in our societies and in our worlds, in our popular culture, in our books, in the stories that we tell. It's that women and mothers carry that weight, um, and so it's sort of hard for me. And I think the reason I stumble so much and I want to be so careful about that exclusionary language is because it's really hard for me to find the line of where society ends and my personal, parenting values or personal beliefs and intentions and the ways I want to parent step in. So
Mm.
like, there's definitely choices I've made in parenting that have pushed me into that primary caregiver role. There are definitely points along the way where I could have made different choices, or me and my partner could have made different choices in our parenting and in our relationship, where I may not have had so much of that weight on me, but I wanted these things, or I thought I wanted them. And it's really hard sometimes. And I think especially like when you're, and obviously Kayla, you would know, like when you're talking to other women and other mothers and other parents, it's hard to find the balance of like, we want to support these choices and we want women and families to be able to make the choices that work best for them. And we also want to critique the cultural narrative that has convinced us it needs to be this way, or that it should be this way, or that this is the natural way of things. And then also critique the flip side that says you're not a feminist if you're a stay-at-home mom. Like that's, am I allowed to swear?
Yes, of course you are.
That's bullshit. Like like feminism is about choice and feminism is about empowerment. But it's, I think, like, and if from a healthcare perspective, you think about like informed consent and informed choice. How do you make an informed choice to be a stay-at-home parent or to be like sort of that primary caregiver when you just don't even know? And when the society, when the weight of society's expectations and society's stories about what motherhood looks like you can't make it, that doesn't, your decision doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? The choices you make as a parent and a mother never exist in a vacuum, so you're always impacted by these things around you. And so it's really hard to figure out what is informed consent, what is an informed choice in the context of the broader patriarchal bullshit we're all swimming in.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but
All good. It's all good. It's important. I think it's really important to identify, like you said, some of that, like, what are my core values? How was I raised? What are the impacts of that? How did I see mothering? How did I see fathering? Or how did I see parenting? And each of those stereotypes, I'm going to call them, or categories or expectations, have an impact on us. Um, I'm taking a training right now through Postpartum International, and yesterday's training was all about the research behind the mother-daughter relationship being one of the single identifiable factors in
oof,
if that daughter will get a perinatal mood disorder. And it was, the research behind this was like, one, first of all, like absolutely incredible, like totally like sound research being done by professionals. I'm just going to close my door.
yeah.
And as a parent, I have boys, but even as a parent, thinking about how my child might parent based on my relationship, like let's remove the gender piece from it, and how my boys might parent, or how I parent because of how I was raised, was just like the reasoning behind all of that, and the science and the research around our behaviors and our patterns and our thoughts, what we assume, what we expect, not only of ourselves but our partner going into this parenting journey, I feel like is something that is sorely missed from preparing humans to be parents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think like again, it's such a loaded sort of conversation because you also, and again, you as a mental health professional would know this, you also don't want to pigeonhole people or tell them that like, oh, well, you had a bad relationship with your mom, so you're like for sure going to end up. But it's like the conversation. I remember when I was doing my education degree and there was this real, I don't know if it was really a debate because I don't know if there was really two equal sides, but there was a conversation around um, sharing kids' behaviors and diagnoses with future teachers, and even if they moved schools, and like sort of the back and forth of like, well, is it better for this kid to have a clean slate? Like, is it better for the teacher, the next teacher, to not have any preconceived notions about like, oh, well, I see Sarah, bit her teacher last year, so I'm going to make sure that she's like, I'm going to whatever. So there was like, do we give them the chance for a clean slate, or do we need to like give the next teacher all the information available to them so that they can teach this like full child? And I say it's not really a debate because most people know it's the second one. Like most people, especially what like, and I don't think there's debate about like with diagnoses, like if there's an actual like clinical like or whatever. But also with the smaller stuff, also that if you're a good educator, you're going to do what you can to not let that influence you in a negative way where you now are like, ooh, I'm going to expect the worst from Sarah. But instead you're like, ooh, this kid obviously like has some trauma or has some like issues with sensory regulation, and so I'm going to like think about that as I like plan things and as I whatever. And I guess I feel the same way about thinking about my own personal family history and my own mental health, is like I don't want to be pigeonholed into, and I'll disclose that I have experienced postpartum anxiety and depression after the birth of my second child, which was really surprising because on paper she should have been the easy one. Like my firstborn was like an unexpected pregnancy. I was in university, I was broke. It was like a fairly like not a new relationship, but like we definitely were not planning on becoming parents yet. She was born premature. Like all the like risk factors were there for my first child. And then my second child was like, we got married, we bought a house, we like planned this pregnancy. She was born the day before her due date. It was all like just picture perfect. And within a few weeks, I was just like a wreck. And it was like, what's wrong with me? What's like, why can't I enjoy this experience like I did the first time? Anyways, that's a whole other thing. Um, but it's really interesting to hear you say that because like my mother has some very serious mental health struggles in her life that sort of came up in my childhood and like before my childhood, but like they came back and forth in my childhood, and our relationship has as a result of that been very strained and very back and forth over the years, especially during my adulthood. And I don't think anybody ever told me that that was a risk factor. I knew that like mental health was something that could be, I don't know if hereditary is the right word, but like that it can be, a risk factor, that if you have direct relatives with diagnoses that you might be more likely to. And so I knew that, but I don't know if anybody had ever laid out for me the like the relationship piece and the relationship with that primary caregiver as being like a potential thing to be aware of. And yeah, I guess I just think that it's sort of, again, it goes back to that like informed choice or informed consent, that like without all the information, how do I know how to prepare myself, or how do I know how to like what to be aware of? And then on the flip side of that too, I've also been able to like throughout my parenting years, I've also been able to see the things that my parents did really well. And I've also been able to like find compassion and forgiveness for them when I see, well, when I'm able to see how friggin' hard parenting is, and I'm able to be like, oh yeah, so like you were already like unhealthy people, and then you like had a bunch of kids, and so like you made mistakes because you're humans. But I've also been able to like sort of sift through some of that and be like, oh, but like there was this core value
Mm.
that I remember from my childhood, even in spite of all the mess around it. I knew that this was something you believed, or I knew that this was something that was important to your family. And a lot of that has stayed with me and informed the way that I parent my kids. And so it's been sort of like this beautiful full circle moment for me, where it doesn't mean that my relationship with my parents is perfect or easy. It doesn't mean that they are excused or forgiven for every mistake or harm that they caused throughout my childhood. But it's given me a new level of like understanding and empathy for them when I'm able to sort of see what was at the core of it and what they were really trying to accomplish in a lot of instances. And it's informed my parenting.
For sure. And that just the acknowledgement and the knowing behind that we can't do parenting perfect. You know, like it's actually humanly
Impossible.
impossible to not have some kind of residual stuff from your childhood, right? Like, and right now being a perfect example. So, as most of you know, but if you're new to the Motherload, my son is 6 and my youngest is going to be 2, and he has a sensory processing regulation thing.
Yeah.
Diagnosable. We have an OT. Like, I'm not just saying he's a strong-willed child. Like, this is like physiologically,
Mm-hmm.
nervous system is like wound up real tight most of the time. Um, and I know that he's going to have opinions about the way that I'm handling this. And he's going to come up with scenarios in which I could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're not in it and you're the 6-year old,
Mm-hmm.
not the mother, you know, in an ideal world, you know, I could meet all of his needs and anticipate his sensory things and buy all the right mitts for winter, all the right socks, and serve the same chicken strips every day for 20 days straight. I could do that, but I'm not going to do it because chicken strips is not the only answer.
I don't know, Kayla. Chicken strips sort of feel like they might be the answer for
I love me
me.
some chicken strips. This boy is made from me. A lot of those things I can also identify with.
Yeah.
But having said that,
Yeah.
I have taken, like you, Cecilia, I have taken a lot of what I didn't love often about my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see the lesson in it now.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
same as that really strict, unforgiving lesson teaching teacher that you really didn't like when you were 16. But then when you got your first job, you were like, oh, I get it now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I know now. And I
Mm-hmm.
needed that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some kids, they need the tough
Yeah.
lessons, right?
And I think just like if I can teach my kids one thing, or if I can just forget teaching my kids, if I can remember one thing throughout parenthood, it's like that I'm human too, and that other parents are human too. So like I can read all the books and I can have all the plans and like know all the theory and all the brain development. And the fact still remains that if I'm feeling stressed or anxious or tired or sad or worried because it's month 1000 of this global pandemic and like whatever. And then my 8-year-old screams at me because I won't let her have another chocolate egg from her Easter stash. You better friggin' believe there's going to be days that I'm going to scream right back. And like, is that in my parenting value chart? I don't have a chart, but like, if there was a chart, like, is that on there? No. Do I believe that yelling is ever helpful or accomplishes what I want it to accomplish? No. But am I a human who like also is sometimes at the end of my rope and also just sometimes has no other resources and I just need to scream? And like, and again, I think like the same way that I feel that, if I can remember that, like, maybe I think it's dumb that my 8-year-old is screaming at me about a chocolate egg, but she's probably feeling the same mix of intense emotions that I'm feeling. So, like, if I can excuse myself screaming and be like, well, it was a bad day, I was like just feeling really at the end of my rope. The same is probably true for her. And like, again, that doesn't mean I have to encourage it. That doesn't mean I have to allow it or like ever give in to those tantrums. But like, I think again, like, yeah, I have a lot of opinions about parenting, and I have a lot of like, I don't just fumble my way through. I make fairly intentional decisions about a lot of what I do and a lot of what I believe. But I'm human and I make mistakes and I go through stressful periods of life, and sometimes our best is not available. Oh, I saw something the other day. I can't remember who shared it, but it was like, if you were operating at your best all the time, it wouldn't be your best. It would be your normal.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my God. Like that's just, it's just not possible. We just can't operate at our best all the time. And that's okay. It would be absurd to expect that of ourselves and of our children and of our own parents. And like, so yeah, just trying to like, and yeah, like if I can teach my kids anything, it's, and I guess like, I mean, just the same as you see the memes that go around, it's like, you know, be kind to everyone because you don't know what they're going through, you don't know the story behind it. And like the same is true, like my kids know my life, but they don't know the stress behind every decision, or the worry, or the tears or the anger or the hurt feelings or any of it, right? They just see mom, and they, yeah. And I mean, for that reason, our actions do hold a lot more gravity, because we do have this sort of power, whether we want it or not, or ask for it or not. And so I do believe that we have to be like conscientious and aware, but that doesn't mean we have to be completely unforgiving of ourselves and completely unreasonable when we inevitably fuck up and when we inevitably snap or make a mistake or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to a mom who did have those expectations of herself? Or those expectations are being put on her by a partner or culture or society?
I guess I would just try to ask her, like, where does she expect that of anyone else?
Mm.
Like, where do we look in the world for the perfect, most emotionally regulated humans? Like, who do you see that never has a bad day, that never makes mistakes, that never loses their temper, that always follows their values to a T and perfectly, that never has to apologize? And I guess that's the other thing, is if she was really, or if they were really, I have some friends, or like I've talked to people sometimes that like, if you're really in that headspace, think about the lesson you're teaching your kids by being able to apologize and by being able to admit when you've made a mistake. Think about the people you know who cannot admit when they've made mistakes. We all know people like that, right? We all know people that can never admit that they made a mistake, or that their apologies are, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but, or that wasn't my intention, right? Like, and so think about what you're teaching your kids. Like, if you need to give yourself like a standard, and if you need to make it like even like trick your brain into like, this is the right thing, this is the good thing to do as a parent, and like tell that to grandma or Aunt Maggie, if they're like, well, you should never yell at your children, be like, well, actually, I'm yelling very intentionally. I made a very intentional choice to yell, because now I get to apologize and be humble and show my kid that everybody makes mistakes, that everybody hurts other people, and that when you hurt somebody, the right thing to do is to apologize and to make amends and to try to do better next time and to ask how you can help them. And I think too, there's something in attachment theory about this, that like attachment theory, thinking about like being well attached to our kids, and I'm not the theory person. My business partner Anna is my goddess of theory and all things amazing. She's so smart. But she always reminds me that like it's not about remaining perfectly attached all the time. It's not about maintaining that or being perfect all the time. It's about the repair, that actually the power of attachment. And I think that this can be true in any relationship. If you think about like with a partner or a friend, that your strongest relationships are not with the people that you never argue with or that you never disagree with, or that you like, those are probably your most surface relationships, like those girlfriends that you like maybe would like go for a drink with once in a while, but like, you never really talk about anything deep, or like you never argue, you never debate, you never like disagree. The actual strong relationships and the actual relationships that like can get through the fire are the ones where people hurt each other or fuck up and then come back and say, I'm sorry. I did this. I know I did this. I know it hurt you. I want to do better. Can we fix this together? And it's actually, and I think of it like scar tissue, right? That like scar tissue is sometimes stronger than the skin that was there before, because it's been broken and it's been healed. Um, and that, yeah, in our parenting and in attachment theory, the belief is that like it's not about maintaining a perfect connection all the time, because that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And it doesn't lead to a very meaningful or real relationship. Kids are smart. Kids can see through that and be like, why is mommy acting weird? And like, she's just like really like, oh, everything is fine, everything is perfect all the time, and I just make all the right choices, and I'm just like really hopped up on tranquilizers, because how else would I do this? But the actual power comes when we make mistakes, and then we go back to our kid, and it's the repair and return and the healing and saying, I'm really sorry. I know I hurt you, and I wish I hadn't, and I want to make it better. And you're allowed to be mad at me, and we can like make this better together. So yeah, I guess, sorry, again, your question was like, what would I say to somebody that was feeling that way? And I guess I would say like, think about the lessons that you teach your kid when you do fuck up, and how you return from that, and what they'll learn from that about how to be a friend and a partner and a human in this world where we make mistakes.
Totally. Oh, that was so good. So good. And I'm gonna close with this story because I think it really relates to what you're saying. So, like I said, my son really struggles with sensory things, and I was working through a self-development course, and the leader of that course said to me one day, "But Kayla, no one else is going to treat him like that."
Mm,
And I was just like, because I was making all of these excuses and these accommodations
mhm,
and all of these things, like excuses rooted in real factual information, but I
mhm,
was indeed like taking on way more than I needed to, right? Like
mhm.
she just said, no one is going to treat him this way. And I was like, shit, I'm not teaching him problem solving. Like I'm not teaching him how to overcome the obstacle, like the literal mountain of getting the sleeve inside of the mitt properly. It's like I'm I'm not going to be there every time he wants to put his mitts on. And I haven't been. Like he can handle himself at daycare. He can handle himself at school. He can stay regulated. It's with me that it's fire. Um, and it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, I'm not teaching him problem solving. Like, I'm not showing him how to solve these problems on his own. I don't need to handhold. Certain moments, he wants me to be there. If he tells me he wants my help, all those things. But I was inserting myself unnecessarily because of my own expectations or ideas of what a mother should do in this moment while their child is throwing a temper tantrum and we have to get
Totally.
the fuck out the door. Like,
Mhm. And
and
I think like,
go ahead.
sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I was just going to say, like, I think it is okay for our kids to know that they can expect a little bit more from us than the rest of the world.
Right.
Like, of course, we're going to do more for them than like their teacher will, or their daycare provider, or like whom their future partner or whomever. And that's okay. Like, I think that's like the beauty of parenting and mothering, is that like I can be your squishy helper, and like I can always be your safe place. But you're right that there's like a time and a place of like, I'm not always gonna be there, and like you're gonna have to figure that out. And like, and I think too, like it's always, I always laugh because like my 8-year-old is the same. Like she is a she, like all her reports from school and daycare and everything, she's just this like angel child. She just like never gets in trouble. I remember she'd been in daycare for like, I don't know, she started daycare when she was like 2, like at like an official center, and it was like at least 6 months, maybe a year later, that they said something to me. They were like, oh, Elizabeth had her first time out today. And I was like, what?
What?
Her first time out? Like, I just assumed they were happening all the time and you just like weren't telling me because like who cares? And they
Yeah.
were like, oh no, like we'll always tell you if there's like behavioral issues. And I was like, and it's always such a funny reminder for me because it's like they're always the worst for us. And I hate that. Like I hate that in my bones because I'm like, I'm the one putting all the freaking work in and I don't get any of the benefits. But also, it's a really good sign if they're the
Yes.
worst for us, you know?
Right?
It means that they trust us.
Yeah.
It means that they know we love them unconditionally, and it means that they know how to behave in other circumstances and that
Exactly.
they know how to regulate themselves and like handle those hard emotions and whatever. And it means that at the end of the day, they just can't regulate anymore and they need to crumple into a ball and scream at you about like not letting them watch TV past 9 p.m. And like, okay, fine. If I have to be that person, then I have to be that person. It sucks and I hate it, but it's a really good sign that something is going right.
Right. And that's actually that's exactly what a psychologist recently had told us. We were possibly pursuing an ADHD diagnosis. The like right now the like golden question is it the pandemic or is it the pandemic or is it my child? Is there actually something happening here or is it the pandemic? So we made this
I feel that
appointment.
way about myself all the time. Is
Yeah.
it the
And
pandemic or am I depressed?
so we made this appointment and she was like, no, no, no. It's a good thing that he's regulating himself at school. It's a good thing that he can regulate himself pre COVID at like a
Yeah.
friend's house and the other parent is giving him consequence or no, you can't have that. Or that's a good thing. He doesn't just like lose it over everybody. She said, I at a 10 out of 10, I'm sorry that it's you, you know, like getting punched and like screamed at and all these things, boots thrown at me because they're going on wrong. It's like she's like, that's good, actually. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to close with that story because I think that it normalizes a lot of the child behaviors that we all experience. We don't want to. It's uncomfortable and it's hurtful. Sometimes, like physically, like my kid is getting old enough that he can actually hurt me now, which is really
I,
embarrassing, but it's true. um and just like knowing that there are reasons why we have those urges inside of us to parent a certain way, and that is coming from our core values, that is coming from a belief we have about attachment or love or relationships, and that leading from that place feels good even if it's uncomfortable, as opposed to leading from the 8 steps in a book, which are totally valuable, but if they're not aligned with your values or who your child is, like a couple of conversations ago we were talking about loving the child you were given instead of the child you expected to have. And so all of that is just like wrapped up in this idea that if we lead and make decisions from this really intentional informed place, that it's not going to be smooth, but in our bodies and our nervous system will acknowledge that like we're not moving against something that we don't believe in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just like last thing, then that means also that like you need to find your safe people to be dysregulated with, right? If
So true.
like if our kids are safe with us and it's like frustrating and like yes, we make mistakes and we yell back sometimes, but like generally you want to be the safe person. So then don't forget that you're a human too and that you need the same things your kid does. So like vent to your girlfriends or your partner or your therapist or like the other moms at the park, like whoever you need to like talk about what an asshole your kid is sometimes. because like you're a human just like they are, and you need the same things they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so good. Thank you so much for this conversation today, Cecilia. I really appreciate you being here and sharing pieces of your parenting that have been less than rainbows and roses, and still acknowledging that those rainbows and roses happen. And that there are these beautiful moments in parenting, and looking for that joy in every day is really important. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you listening or watching, however you are consuming this today. And let me know what resonated, and possibly what kinds of conversations you'd like to hear in the future. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Bye.